Hello, I'm here at Euston Station in London and I'm going to tell you about my track Set Me Free. Why am I at Euston Station? It might seem like a little bit of a weird place to be recording something like this. I'll explain that a little bit later. Let me tell you a story about how my mum and my wife ended up on my track Set Me Free. So I was telling this story to my wife about how, oh my god, I've lost my spark, how do I get back there? How do I get to this kind of authentic version of myself? And she was like, it's still there, I can see it. And I loved it. I was like, I'm recording that, love that. Another time I was at a festival with my mum and I was kind of having the same sort of conversation with her about, oh, you remember what I was like when I was little? I was so full of life and adventure and kind of very free and wanted to make everybody happy. I was like, I want to kind of grab that and bring it back into myself and channel it into my music, into my creativity. And my mum said something which was just really hit home. She just simply said, your time will come. I was like, yeah, that's going on the track. Now, next, I'm going to tell you a story that involves lambs and involves canoes. But before that, let's talk about the artwork. Did I make the right choice for the artwork for my track Set Me Free? Let's take a look at the options I considered. See what you think. So here's option one. It's a picture of three girls in flight, and I particularly like the colors in this one and how they give these retro childhood memory vibes. Option two was this beautiful shot of a pigeon mid-flight. I kind of like the melancholy colors here and the seemingly pensive pose of the bird. Plus, I just really like pigeons, and I think they get a bad rap. Option 3 is this arty shot of a seagull in flight. I like the picture because it feels like the bird is on some kind of big journey. It also just feels thoughtful. Option 4 is a bit different. It's a still from a video of me performing the track live, but it does have a video of the sky and some clouds projected over the whole scene, so it still has that association with flying. Which one's your favourite? Let me know below. Have you ever wondered what music sounds like before it gets all polished and put into the public domain? Well, here is how my track Set Me Free started. The very first kernel of an idea, the very first time I pressed save on my computer, and this is what it sounds like. I think that's pretty cool. By version 3, it's actually starting to sound a bit worse and not really anything like the final product, but here it is. Yeah, I don't like that. And then, by version 33, still not sounding particularly great, but you can actually recognize the final product in there. And of course, this is what the final product sounds like. Okay, so I promised you a story about lambs and canoes and self-realization. So this is a story about a canoeing trip I went to with some friends. I think it was in Oxfordshire or something, and we were going down this river, and it's beautiful. You've got these hanging willows and the sun's shining through. Really just absolutely gorgeous. And at one point there was this clearing to the side, and I looked at it, and there was just a flock of like sheep and lambs. And I noticed that the lambs, they were just so playful, like jumping around and climbing everywhere and kind of sort of headbutting the adults and just being really playful and silly. And the adults, that's what just sort of like eating, ambling really slowly and eating and then eating and then eating some more. And I thought, my God, maybe we're just like all naturally designed to turn into this when we're older. But then I thought, no. There's one animal, actually there's probably loads more than that, one animal, but there's one animal, like goats. Think about goats, like adult goats. They're like up cliff edges and reservoir dams and trees. And they're so playful and just like curious. Like, yeah, that's who I want to be when I'm older, when I'm older. Why not? Let's all aim to be a goat. I'm going to run you through a breakdown of my track
set me free, and in particular the drop. First of all, I'm going to start off with the bass. There's kind of two bassy instruments in there. One of them is a kind of wobbly, dubsteppy type of bass, and the other one kind of has a bit of a garagey feel to it, and the two of them rhythmically play against each other, which I think is pretty cool, and it sounds a bit like this. The drums have got this kind of filtering wizardry going on, which gives that real kick to the drop, and it sounds a little bit like this. Alright, I accidentally left in that little trancey synth in there, but that's what that sounds like on its own. And then next we're going to go into the ambient stuff, which is kind of a Minev staple, really. First of all, we got this kind of 80s synth. It's a little bit naff, to be honest, on its own, but it has a bit of padding, a bit of texture to the sound. It sounds like this. And then we add this soft pad, and then it gets really lush. And then strings. I can't resist putting some strings on, honestly. And then finally, let's check out the vocals, the hardest bit to record. But that's where the soul of the track comes from, so gotta get that bit right. And this is what that sounds like. Let's give them a bit of support from the pads. Let's see what that all sounds like when put together. Right, I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to check out the track, links there somewhere or down there somewhere.
Okay, and now finally, while I'm at Euston Station recording a video about my track Set Me Free. It's to do with the origin of the track, and it's to do with my day job, which unfortunately doesn't really gel with my musical creativity very well. And I often find myself in the mornings commuting into work, and this kind of like flow of creativity comes into me, and I'm like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, and then within like half an hour of arriving at work, that's just been crushed and squeezed out of me. There was one time I was commuting to Manchester for work specifically, and I thought to myself, you know what? For those 2 hours, I'm just gonna clock in late for work. I'm gonna make some music. The sun was shining through the windows, and the kind of London was gradually, like the urban landscape was gradually morphing into this natural landscape. And this track was just flowing out of me, it was coming out, this sort of mixture of electronic music, the danciness of electronic music, and the emotions that I was feeling in that moment. Yeah, I don't know what it is about these in-between spaces, you know, the journeys, like where you're not here, you're not there, you're kind of in transit. Yeah, maybe, do you know what, maybe I should compose more often on the trains. It seems to be working well for me. But anyway, it's called Set Me Free. If you listen to it, you'll understand why I think that sense of yearning really comes through in the music.